Have you been feeling a little bit alien in your own body lately? Sort of like the things that you used to identify with are kind of not fitting with you anymore? Well, that might be a sign that you are in a transition space. And I know that transitions can be difficult, but the fact that you are identifying those mismatches is a very good sign. So maybe you've identified it because, I don't know, the things that used to interest you or give you joy are, I don't know, are feeling a bit boring now, or maybe the work that you're doing, which used to be stimulating, has become very draining, or maybe it's even more of a physical thing where you feel that, you used to have much more energy for certain things before, and now you just can't get yourself to do them. And the mere fact that you are identifying those things, that you are identifying kind of something that is out of place, or maybe even that has become a pattern in your life, is a sign that you have taken enough distance from it to see it as something that is not you. And I mean, if I could overlap this idea with a spiritual perspective, our essence, our true nature, our being, the core of what we are, doesn't need and doesn't have any labels. Or sorry, I have maybe an eyelash or something. But it doesn't need anything to define it. It just is. We just are this thing that we are. And if we can look at something or even name something, that immediately is, as a sign that, that is not what we are. and this is a bit of a problem with the identities, which are quite important to a certain extent in our societies. Identity matters. But the problem with identifying with something is that that it doesn't kind of allow us to be more than that identity. I just read a quote yesterday it's an idea that I've heard before, but in a book by Stephen Walensky, a psychotherapist psychotherapist and author and other things, that said, I'm going to get it wrong. I'll put it in text, but it was essentially, anything that you identify with limits you. And the idea behind this is that, if you are putting labels onto this, this core thing that you are, immediately you are reducing it, to something, much smaller, if we wanted to use quantity, than what it really is. And, so the difficult thing with identities is that, when we kind of assume something so deeply that, that we are no longer able to kind of see it, from the outside. And, linking this to, for instance, meditation. If you have ever meditated, you have probably heard this, this idea of not following your thoughts. So essentially when we meditate, we don't necessarily kind of want to just have a vacuum mind. We know that thoughts are going to come, maybe emotions are going to come, but essentially what we want to do is not attach to it, not follow them. So with thoughts, for instance, there'll be a thought that comes, and you observe that there's a thought that is coming, and you just allow it to leave. This kind of, this allows us to, to see ourselves as somebody who is, beyond that thought that we are thinking. We are not identifying with that thought. If we follow that thought, immediately, if you've ever meditated, you'll know what I mean. You immediately kind of like leave this, this clear mind space, and you start thinking about this thing, and then that leads to another thought. So you are essentially taken by that thought and this sensation of expansion and, clarity, true self just immediately gets lost. And it's the same thing with what I'm talking about in terms of, transitions and being in this place where you are starting to see that, this, I'm realizing that this thing that I've done all throughout my life is kind of out of place now. And I mean, I'll give you a tangible example so it might be a little bit clear. Maybe you woke up one day and you realized, oh gosh, the last 3 relationships that I have had have this very particular pattern. It probably during those 3 relationships you didn't realize that pattern, and you just you just lived them and experienced them without kind of by being inside them, being kind of taken by them. And the moment when you wake up and realize that there's this misalignment that has become a pattern, or that you have identified as a pattern, it is at that moment when you are able to, when you are essentially ready to, to integrate that, or to work on that, or to transform it, or transition from it. And I'll give you another example with emotions. So emotions, when we are taken by an emotion, whether it be joy or fear, or rage, whatever it is, even our language pushes us, to say, I am angry, I am happy. I think in Irish, they have a different way of saying it as I have anger, I have happiness, which I find very beautiful. But normally we say, I am angry, I am happy. And everything that we do and see in that moment of being, taken by the emotion is kind of filtered through that. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, there's nothing wrong with feeling things, because we are humans and we experience through this body, and we are going to, have reactions and emotions to the things that happen to us. The issue is when we identify with that emotion and we attach to it, and we don't allow it to kind of like run its course. You can think of like our system as kind of like an open energy system, and there's a feeling that comes because something, you reacted to something that happens in the world, and you're taken by that emotion, you allow yourself to feel that emotion, and then if you allow yourself to feel that emotion, the emotion just, will run its course. When we don't allow it to run its course, or when we judge the emotion, oh no, I shouldn't be angry, it's not a good feeling, or oh, I really, really love feeling this joy, so I'm just going to want to keep it, well, that's when it starts to become an issue, because we are, we don't allow it to kind of run its course and allow ourselves to go on to the world and experience the next thing. So transitions, in looking at this from a deep therapy perspective, or a transpersonal therapy perspective, this thing of starting to notice, anomalies in your life, this feeling of, of feeling a bit alien in your body, of not really, not really fitting into in yourself, is also something quite common in the sense that our unconscious is constantly kind of like leading us into the direction of things that we are ready to integrate. So what I mean by this is, going back to the example of waking up one day and realizing that there's a pattern in your relationships. Being, those relationships happened, and that pattern was there, so it essentially, your unconscious has been placing you in these situations. Oh gosh, I can't speak. Where you could potentially experience and learn from this. But the moment when you realize it, that is the sign that you are ready to integrate it. So your unconscious is never going to show you something that you aren't ready to integrate. And this is why when I hear things like, pushing clients or patients in therapy to, to experience things that they're not ready for, and, this term of re-traumatization, I mean, at least in the type of therapy that I practice, it's not possible because the only, the only things that you will, that you work with are the things that you are already realizing, and the fact that you're realizing them means that you're ready to integrate them. So that's a bit of overlap with spirituality that I see, or with therapy. But now, how to integrate it. Once you are in this place where you feel a bit of an alien in your own body, and you are very conscious that these things that you used to be are no longer serving you, or they no longer feel well. Okay, but how, what do I do with that? How can I transition from that? If we didn't do anything and we just allowed, life to take its course, it would probably happen as well. But, because we want to do things with, with observation and, in clarity, and we are conscious individuals who are, actively participating in our, in our path and our growth, there are several practices that you can do. I'm sure that, if you've meditated, or if you're in a spiritual path or in therapy, you probably, have encountered different ways. But I'm going to show you one that, that I personally like. And it's essentially like a foundational practice as well for this idea of, even of what I was mentioning in meditation, of, seeing, kind of like just seeing the thoughts, and not identifying with them. But in terms of kind of, this idea of the old identity and the new identity. So in this practice, you can do it with your eyes closed in a meditative position, or you can even do it lying down. What you want to do is essentially, so you have yourself, and then you want to see that, that, let's call it right now, this other identity. And you want to see yourself, seeing that identity. So essentially, there are, let's look at it as three elements. So there's the element of you present, seeing this other identity. I'll give you a practical example so it's a little bit clearer. But let's say one of the things that I am struggling with today is that I don't feel that, I'm having trouble with the fact that I used to feel very energetic about things, and I used to feel that I could, summit every mountain that I wanted, or run, whichever marathon, and had all this energy for doing all these different projects. And now it's feeling a little bit, I'm feeling very alien to that, because I don't feel that I have the same capacity. So I have myself present, looking at this, this other identity that I am feeling a mismatch with today. And I see myself sitting here, observing this, this other thing that is happening. You could also, maybe it's a particular moment that you're imagining. So maybe it's maybe it's a particular event that happened that, that has created a lot of emotion in you. So if you do this exercise and you find that it is easy to kind of observe yourself, observing this image, and you feel that you can, be in this place observing this image without kind of being taken by that emotion, then, that is a sign that you are, you're kind of in a place where the transition is happening. You might feel, though, that it is very difficult for you to detach from those feelings and that visualization that you're having. And if that happens to you, that is, that is also a sign that, this identity or this experience is still, let's call it quite raw, or it still has, a lot of you taken by it, which is completely fine and quite normal. And what you can do if that happens is allow yourself to, to be in this visualization, the one that, the one that you don't feel that you fit with anymore. and allow yourself to feel what that feels. If you know, if you feel that it is kind of the self today looking at that which has all the feelings, then allow yourself to kind of be in this place and feel those feelings. Essentially what we want to do is observe and allow without judgment. And without judgment, I mean, kind of like not rationalize what is happening and not label it as good as bad. So, and we want to allow ourselves to express, essentially to feel what it is that we're feeling. And, and you might need to do this depending on how kind of raw or charged the identification is. You might need to do this a few times or maybe even more. But I like this practice because one, it kind of gives me a sense of where in the process I am. If it still feels very charged, if I feel, I feel that I can interchange with those, with the two kind of identities, and I feel fine. And I am able to see myself, kind of like expand my observer and see myself while this is happening, then that's a good sign that, not to label it good or bad, but it's a sign that, that the process is taking its course, and that I am able to observe it from the outside. If I feel very taken by the emotion, which sometimes can happen, then I just allow myself to, to feel the things that are happening, and I allow myself to feel it. And then maybe you change and you allow yourself to feel it, then you change again, and you will probably find that the kind of like the big emotion starts to subside until it comes a moment where it no longer matters. You're allowed to observe yourself, and and it doesn't kind of like create a reaction. The sign, or the way in which you can know if it's taken your reaction, is if you place yourself in one part of the visualization, or even here, if you're observing it from the outside, from the observer, and you still feel in your body, maybe it's something that creates anger in you, and you still feel in the pit of your stomach this anger, that's a sign that, that you have to allow yourself to feel that anger, and it's fine. So, and the other part that I like about this exercise is that it also, it also reinforces the, the notion that, the things that happen are not me, kind of disidentify with, these things, kind of like desolidify yourself, de-anchor your experience, and, and have a lighter, have a lighter experience. So that's the practice. I'm just going through my mental thoughts to see if there was anything else that I wanted to add to this, but I think it essentially is that if you are starting to notice that you don't feel that, super at ease in your body, and you're starting to notice, patterns or things that don't feel as natural or as easy, listen to that. It's a really great sign that you're transitioning, and the only place to go from here is a better place, and it's a growth place. It's kind of like like you're passing on to a different world in a video game or something like that. I don't play video games, so I don't know if that analogy actually applies. But anyhow, if you try it and you have any questions, let me know. I'll try to answer them in the comments. And I hope it goes well. Happy transitioning.